Today we journey back in time to 1692. We are visiting the homestead of Rebecca Nurse in Danvers, Massachusetts, just outside of Salem. Now I know you're all drooling just about now because, hey, who doesn't love a Red Saltbox set in this beautiful location? Who doesn't love a New England autumn? And today is October 29, which gives you a very special clue into why we are here looking at Rebecca Nurse's estate. Perhaps the story of Rebecca Nurse has to start in Salem, Massachusetts. Now, ordinarily, I would avoid going to Salem, Massachusetts anytime in the month of October because it's known to have 1 million tourists. But as luck would have it, the majority of people in Salem want to go to the hocus pocus places and the Halloween shops. But if you want to go to the Peabody Essex Museum and see the Salem Witch Trials exhibit, today is the perfect day to do it. We go back to 1692 and the Salem community, which lived under an ominous cloud of suspicion. Now, I, of course, enjoyed the antique door and the antique window displayed in the exhibit. However, there was so much more to this era. Because the early settlers were farmers, Salem Village was quite extensive, now covering other towns. But this was the area that was considered Salem Village and the part of the witch trials. Back in the day, life was hard. Settlers were forced to endure the cold, harsh winters in small homes, merely heated by a fireplace. We can't really know the constant stress they lived under. After all, the survival rate was low and the infant mortality rate was high. Even worse, if you did have an infant that survived, they may not survive until they are 20 years old. It was a heartbreaking time. Most in the village lived under a constant state of fear, and many of PTSD, having lost loved ones in brutal attacks or sicknesses that they could not heal. They worried about their crops because if their crops were scanty, they may not make it through the winter. Not to mention that their Puritan beliefs and practices set them up for all kinds of stress and trauma, as they believed that the devil was inhabiting them and ruining their lives at any time. There was jealousy in keeping up with the Joneses and wanting a bigger property, and these were all just some of the things that entered into this witch hysteria period. There were a number of people convicted and hanged as witches during that time, but today we are just going to focus on Rebecca Nurse. Rebecca, a 71-year-old devout Christian. Rebecca, a mother of 8 adult children living by her. Rebecca, the wife of Francis. Their lives would be altered, and many others forever. Okay, so let's face it. You and I are all going to be drawn to this property because this is a gorgeous salt box built in the 1600s in New England on a beautiful piece of property with fields and trees all around it. This salt box is filled with antiques, barrels and butter churns and boxes and trunks and all manner of really cool things. I mean, who doesn't love to look at the redware and the old pewter candlestick holders and the dough bowls. We just look back and we say, wow, things were so much simpler. No televisions, no cell phones, no cars and trains and planes, and we didn't have to rush here and there. It's just so romantic, isn't it? Candlelight, fresh home cooking, a time when the whole family is together. The homestead property, initially granted to Townsend Bishop in 1636, went through several owners before being leased by the nurses in 1678. Today, only 27 acres remain of the original 300-acre farm. The house remained in the Nurse family until 1784, after which it was purchased by a descendant of the Putnam family. In 1926, the house was acquired and restored by the Rebecca Nurse Memorial Association, and since 1981, it has been owned by the Danvers Alarm List Company. But there's so much more to the Rebecca Nurse story than meets the eye. You see, in mid-March of 1692, a young girl named Ann Putnam Jr. made a claim to have witnessed the apparition of an elderly woman sitting in her grandmother's chair. Encouraged by others in the Putnam household, she identified this ghost as Rebecca Nurse. In late March, Rebecca's son-in-law, John Tarbell, and her son Samuel visited the Putnam house to understand how Rebecca had been accused, suspecting that Ann Putnam Sr. had influenced her daughter to name Rebecca Nurse as witch. You see, Ann Putnam Sr. was jealous of Rebecca Nurse and wanted her property. Abigail Williams also asserted that she was tormented by the specter of Rebecca Nurse, as did Ann Putnam Sr. When former Salem village minister Lawson visited the Putnam residence in March, Lawson, who could not see the specter himself, watched in alarm as Ann Putnam Sr. struggled with the nurse's specter. Around the third week of March, a committee consisting of Israel Porter, his wife Elizabeth, Daniel Andrews, and Peter Cloyce, who was Rebecca Nurse's brother-in-law, visited Rebecca Nurse. She was unwell and expressed sympathy for the afflicted, even suggesting that some of the accused might be incorrect. The visitors then revealed that she too had been accused, which left Nurse incredulous and amazed. She questioned why God had afflicted her in her old age. On March 24, a complaint was sworn against her by Jonathan and Edward Putnam, leading to her arrest. During her examination at the Salem Village Meeting House that day, the afflicted individuals, including Ann Putnam Jr., Ann Putnam Sr., Abigail Williams, Elizabeth Hubbard, Mary Walcott, and Goody Pope, writhed and claimed that Nurse's specter tormented them. They reported seeing the devil whispering in her ear and familiars in the form of birds in the room, mimicking her actions. Ann Putnam Sr. shouted at Rebecca Nurse and then became paralyzed, requiring her husband Thomas to carry her from the meeting house. Under persistent questioning by Judge John Hawthorne, Rebecca Nurse insisted, "I am as innocent as the child unborn." She was bewildered by the chaos and was ordered to be held in Salem jail due to the afflictions witnessed during her examination. In a sermon 3 days later, Reverend Samuel Parris discussed the presence of the devil within the church, leading Rebecca's sister, Sarah Cloyce, to leave the meeting house, believing it was a reference to her sister. In April, the afflicted claimed that Rebecca Nurse, along with others, participated in a witches' Sabbath, presided over by the specter of Reverend George Burroughs, whom they called the King of the Witches. Rebecca's sisters, Sarah Cloyce and Mary Easty, were accused of witchcraft and jailed. On June 2, Rebecca Nurse underwent a humiliating intimate search of her body, where a mole or skin irregularity could be considered a witch's mark. Rebecca Nurse's grand jury trial began on June 29, along with the trials of other accused witches. Despite intense questioning, Nurse maintained her innocence and explained that the devil may appear in my shape. Sarah Holton testified, attributing her husband's death to a disagreement with Nurse over loose pigs in 1689. A petition signed by 39 community members in support of Rebecca Nurse was presented to the court. Initially found not guilty, the reaction of the afflicted in the courtroom led to Chief Justice William Stoughton's dissatisfaction with the verdict. He questioned Rebecca Nurse about her earlier statement discerning Deliverance Hobbs, leading to her silence, which was interpreted as an admission of guilt. Her verdict was reversed and she was found guilty. In July, she was excommunicated from the Salem Town Church. Rebecca Nurse's supporters sought help from Governor William Phipps, who initially granted her a reprieve, but later succumbed to pressure from the afflicted and, guess who, the Putnams, resulting in her condemnation and execution on July 19, 1692. But who was this Rebecca Nurse? Rebecca Town Nurse, born in 1621 in England, moved to Salem, Massachusetts around 1635 with her family. Among her 7 siblings were Mary and Sarah. She married Francis Nurse in the mid-1640s, and by 1692 they had 8 grown children. It is unclear why she, an upstanding and beloved member of Salem Village, became an accused witch, but various factors including grievances, border disputes, jealousy, and family dynamics likely contributed to her targeting. On October 17, 1711, an act was signed to reverse the attenders for those of the accused of witchcraft, posthumously clearing the name of Rebecca Nurse and her sister Mary Easty. On this beautiful Rebecca Nurse homestead, only 27 acres of the original 300 remain. The Nurses purchased this homestead in 1678. In 1981, the Danvers Alarm List Company acquired this property. On this property sits a replica of the Salem Village Meeting House. This was built on the Rebecca Nurse homestead for the filming of the 1984 American Playhouse film, 3 Sovereigns for Sarah. This film focuses on all 3 town sisters, Rebecca Nurse, Mary Eastley, and Sarah Cloyce. Rebecca and Mary were both hanged, quote, for the sin of witchcraft. However, Sarah was able to escape that fate and lived on. Today, it's impossible to know all the causes of what fueled this witchcraft hysteria. I bought a lot of books, and we will examine that in another episode after I know just a little bit more. Out of the original 550 people in the Salem village community, at least 1/3 were imprisoned by the time the Salem witch trial was done. 1/3 of the people. There was not one house that wasn't affected by either someone being accused of witchcraft, being executed for the accusation of witchcraft, or that accused others of witchcraft. This destroyed the community, a community that needed each other to survive in these harsh times. We are fortunate because we can learn from history. By putting community above all else, above power struggles and strife and jealousy, we can reach out to each other in love and keep our communities together. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.